Detective Marcus Johnson had always been a man of quiet determination. Born and raised in the bustling streets of Chicago, he had spent nearly 2 decades climbing the ranks of the police force. Known for his sharp instincts, unwavering integrity, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life, Marcus had earned a reputation as one of the city's finest officers. But despite his success, Marcus felt called to do more. He wanted to make a real difference, not just in his own community but in places where hope seemed fleeting and justice often felt out of reach. When the opportunity arose to become the new police chief in Ridgewood, a small southern town struggling with corruption and distrust between its residents and law enforcement, Marcus didn't hesitate. It was a chance to leave behind the chaos of Chicago and bring meaningful change to a place that desperately needed it. The mayor of Ridgewood personally reached out to him, praising his track record and expressing confidence that he could turn things around. For Marcus, this wasn't just another job. It was a mission. The day before his official start date, Marcus packed up his belongings and set off on the long drive to Ridgewood. His car, an old sedan with dents and scratches from years of service, was filled with boxes of paperwork, books about leadership, and a few personal mementos, a framed photo of his late mother, a baseball signed by his favorite team, and a leather-bound journal where he jotted down thoughts and ideas. As he drove through rolling hills and endless stretches of farmland, Marcus allowed himself to imagine what lay ahead. Would the people of Ridgewood welcome him? Could he truly bridge the gap between the police department and the community? These questions swirled in his mind, but Marcus remained optimistic. He believed in second chances, for himself, for others, and for towns like Ridgewood. By the time he arrived in Ridgewood late in the afternoon, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting golden hues over the sleepy town. Unlike the towering skyscrapers and busy streets of Chicago, Ridgewood felt almost frozen in time. The main street was lined with quaint shops, dusty diners, and faded brick buildings. Children played on sidewalks while older folks sat on porches, sipping lemonade and watching the world go by. It was peaceful, almost idyllic, but Marcus knew appearances could be deceiving. Beneath the surface of this picturesque town lurked deep-seated issues that wouldn't be easy to fix. Deciding not to announce his arrival just yet, Marcus opted to keep a low profile. Instead of heading straight to the precinct or checking into a hotel, he parked his car near a gas station at the edge of town. He figured grabbing a cup of coffee and stretching his legs would help him clear his head after the long journey. Dressed casually in jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers, Marcus stepped out of his car, blending seamlessly into the crowd. No badge, no uniform, just a man enjoying a brief moment of anonymity. As he leaned against his car, sipping his coffee and scrolling through messages on his phone, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him. Glancing around, he noticed a group of 3 men standing near their patrol car across the street. They were young, probably rookies based on their posture and demeanor, chatting animatedly and occasionally glancing in his direction. At first, Marcus thought nothing of it. Cops often exchanged curious looks when they spotted strangers, especially those who looked out of place. But there was something unsettling about the way these officers kept staring at him, their expressions shifting from casual curiosity to something darker. Unbeknownst to Marcus, these officers, Officer Ryan, Officer Blake, and Officer Cole, had already formed their own conclusions about him. To them, Marcus didn't fit the mold of a typical visitor. His dark skin, casual attire, and unfamiliar face made him stand out in a town where everyone seemed to know everyone else. In their minds, he was either a drifter passing through or someone up to no good. Their biases took hold quickly, fueled by years of unchecked authority and a toxic culture within the department. Ryan nudged Blake and smirked. "Look at this guy," he said, nodding toward Marcus. "What's he doing? Here?" "Doesn't exactly scream local." Blake chuckled. "Maybe he's lost, or maybe he thinks he can hang around our turf without consequences." Cole, the most aggressive of the trio, narrowed his eyes. "Nah, I think he's trouble. You see how he's acting all cool? leaning against his car like he owns the place. Let's teach him a lesson. Without hesitation, the three officers crossed the street and approached Marcus. Their body language screamed intimidation, hands resting on their belts, boots scuffing against the pavement, smirks plastered across their faces. Marcus immediately sensed trouble brewing but remained calm. He turned to face them, holding his ground as they closed in. "What's going on here?" Marcus asked, his voice steady and measured. "You tell us," Ryan shot back, folding his arms. "Who are you and why are you hanging around our town?" "I'm just stopping for gas and coffee," Marcus replied, gesturing to his car and the empty cup in his hand. No harm done. But the officers weren't interested in explanations. They began peppering him with questions, accusing him of loitering and refusing to cooperate. When Marcus tried to reason with them, pointing out that he hadn't broken any laws, they grew even more hostile. "Don't play smart with us," Blake sneered. "We don't need your attitude." "Yeah, maybe we should show you how things work around here," Cole added, cracking his knuckles. Before Marcus could react, the situation spiraled out of control. The officers grabbed him roughly, twisting his arms behind his back and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. Despite his protests, they ignored his attempts to explain himself, treating him like a criminal rather than a fellow human being. The whole ordeal happened so fast that Marcus barely had time to process what was happening. One minute he was enjoying a quiet moment outside a gas station. The next, he found himself completely powerless. The officers dragged Marcus to a nearby light pole where they proceeded to tie him up using zip ties. Humiliated and furious, Marcus struggled to maintain his composure. Passers-by stared in shock, some whispering to each other, while others simply looked away. None dared to intervene. As the officers laughed and joked about their cruel prank, Marcus locked eyes with one of them and spoke in a voice laced with both anger and restraint. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said, his words cutting through the air like a knife. Cole scoffed. "Oh yeah? Enlighten us, tough guy. Who are you supposed to be?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Deep down, he knew that actions would speak louder than words, and when the truth came out, these officers would regret everything they'd done. Little did they realize that the man tied to the pole wasn't just anyone. He was Detective Marcus Johnson, a decorated officer from Chicago, and more importantly, he was their new police chief. The officers' laughter echoed through the quiet evening as they stood back to admire their handiwork. Marcus, tied tightly to the light pole with zip ties cutting into his wrists, remained eerily calm despite the humiliation. His face was a mask of controlled anger, but inside, his mind raced. He knew better than to escalate the situation further. Not while he was physically restrained and outnumbered, but every second that ticked by only fueled his determination to make these men understand the gravity of what they had done. Cole, clearly enjoying himself the most, leaned in closer to taunt Marcus. "So, big shot," he sneered, crossing his arms. "What's your plan now? Gonna call someone to come save you?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, letting the cool night air steady his nerves. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but laced with authority. "You've made a mistake tonight," he said, his voice low but firm. "A big one." Ryan chuckled nervously, glancing at Blake for reassurance. "Oh yeah? And what's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Marcus continued, locking eyes, "with each officer in turn, that when this is over, none of you will have jobs anymore." For a moment, there was silence. The officers exchanged uneasy looks, unsure if Marcus was bluffing or simply trying to scare them. Cole, however, wasn't about to let him get the upper hand. "Nice try, buddy," he snapped. "But we're the ones in charge here. You're just some nobody tied to a pole, don't forget that." With that, the three men turned away, laughing and joking as they climbed back into their patrol car. As they drove off, leaving Marcus alone and humiliated, Cole rolled down his window and called out one last insult. "Maybe your new boss will come rescue you," he shouted, his words dripping with mockery. They sped away without another glance, completely oblivious to the fact that Marcus was the new boss, and their careers were already hanging by a thread. Alone on the sidewalk, Marcus exhaled slowly, allowing himself a brief moment to process what had just happened. The pain in his wrists from the tight zip ties was sharp, but it paled in comparison to the sting of indignity. Here he was, a decorated detective with decades of experience under his belt, reduced to a spectacle for these reckless young officers to toy with. What made it worse was knowing that their actions weren't born out of ignorance. They were deliberate, cruel, and rooted in prejudice. Despite everything, Marcus refused to let despair take hold. He had faced adversity before, both professionally and personally, and he knew how to channel frustration into action. Reaching into his pocket with difficulty, he managed to pull out a small folding knife he always carried, a habit instilled in him during his early days on the force. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to free himself. Carefully, he began sawing at the zip ties, gritting his teeth against the discomfort as the plastic dug deeper into his skin. As he worked, Marcus noticed movement nearby. A teenager, no older than 16, stood a few feet away, filming the entire scene on his phone. The boy looked nervous, glancing around as if debating whether to intervene or run. Recognizing an opportunity, Marcus locked eyes with him. "Hey," Marcus called out softly, trying not to startle the kid. "I'm not going to hurt you. Just keep recording, okay? This needs to be documented." The teenager hesitated but nodded, stepping closer cautiously. Are you all right?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I'll live," Marcus replied with a wry smile. "But I need people to see what happened here tonight. Can you promise me that?" The boy nodded again, clutching his phone tightly. Tyrell, as he introduced himself, explained that he'd been walking home from a friend's house when he saw the officers approach Marcus. Horrified by what unfolded, he instinctively started recording, unsure of what else to do. For the next several minutes, Tyrell stayed close, capturing footage of Marcus freeing himself and offering quiet encouragement. By the time the zip ties finally snapped, Marcus felt a flicker of gratitude toward the brave teenager who hadn't turned a blind eye. Once freed, Marcus rubbed his sore wrists and took a moment to collect himself. Tyrell lingered nearby, still holding his phone. "What happens now?" the boy asked hesitantly. "Now," Marcus said, standing up straight and brushing off his hoodie, "we make sure justice is served." He thanked Tyrell for his courage and urged him to upload the video online once he got home. "This isn't just about me," Marcus added. "It's about showing everyone what happens when power goes unchecked. People need to see this." Tyrell promised to share the video and parted ways reluctantly, casting one last worried glance over his shoulder as he disappeared into the night. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Marcus climbed back into his car and headed toward the precinct. Every mile brought a mix of emotions: anger at the officers' blatant disregard for human decency, frustration at the systemic issues plaguing law enforcement, and resolve to ensure that such behavior never went unpunished again. He replayed Cole's parting words in his head: "Maybe your new boss will come rescue you." If only they knew. By the time Marcus arrived at the precinct, news of the incident was already spreading like wildfire. Tyrell had uploaded the video to social media within minutes of getting home, and it quickly gained traction. Comments poured in from outraged viewers across the country, many calling for immediate accountability. Local community leaders demanded answers, and national news outlets picked up the story, shining a spotlight on Ridgewood's troubled police department. Inside the precinct, chaos reigned. Officers scrambled to figure out who the man in the video was and why he seemed so unfazed by being publicly humiliated. Some speculated he might be an undercover investigator sent to expose corruption, while others dismissed him as a random victim caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Meanwhile, the mayor and senior officials gathered in a conference room, frantically discussing damage control. When Marcus walked into the building, his presence sent shockwaves through the room. Dressed casually, but carrying himself with undeniable authority, he introduced himself as the new police chief. Gasps rippled through the crowd as realization dawned. The man tied to the pole was none other than the person tasked with leading their department. Mayor Linda Hayes, visibly flustered, rushed forward to greet him. "Detective Johnson, I had no idea this happened to you," she stammered. "Please, tell us what we can do to fix this." Marcus held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "First," he said, his voice commanding attention, "we identify the officers involved. Second, we investigate how something like this could happen in the first place. And third, we implement changes to ensure it never happens again. No excuses, no exceptions." As Marcus laid out his plan, the weight of his words settled heavily over the room. Everyone present realized that this wasn't just a PR nightmare, it was a reckoning. And Marcus, far from seeking revenge, was determined to use the incident as a catalyst for transformation. But he also knew that holding individuals accountable was only the beginning. Real change would require dismantling years of ingrained biases and rebuilding trust from the ground up. The stage was set. Justice would be served, but the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The days following Marcus Johnson's arrival at the precinct were nothing short of chaotic. News of the viral video had spread like wildfire, igniting outrage not just in Ridgewood, but across the nation. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like #Justice for Marcus and #Reform Ridgewood PD, amplifying calls for accountability. Community leaders, civil rights organizations, and even national figures weighed in, demanding answers from the mayor and the police department. For a town that prided itself on its quiet charm, Ridgewood suddenly found itself under an unrelenting spotlight. Mayor Linda Hayes, who had initially welcomed Marcus with open arms, now faced mounting pressure to act decisively. She held an emergency press conference outside City Hall, flanked by senior officials and members of the police department. Her hands trembled as she addressed the crowd, her voice wavering between apology and defensiveness. "What happened to Detective Marcus Johnson is unacceptable," she began, glancing nervously at the cameras. "As your mayor, I take full responsibility for ensuring that justice is served and that reforms are implemented immediately." Her words, though carefully chosen, did little to quell the anger simmering among residents. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, holding signs that read "No more abuse and accountability now." Some shared personal stories of mistreatment by officers, painting a grim picture of systemic issues within the department. Others called for Marcus to lead the charge in rooting out corruption and rebuilding trust. Inside the precinct, tensions ran high. Officers whispered anxiously in hallways, speculating about who might be implicated in the incident. The three men responsible, Ryan, Blake, and Cole, were noticeably absent, having called in sick after realizing the gravity of their actions. Rumors swirled about whether they'd already been suspended or if they were planning to flee town altogether. Those left behind grappled with conflicting emotions. Some felt embarrassed by their colleagues' behavior, while others resented the sudden scrutiny being placed on the entire force. Marcus wasted no time taking control of the situation. In a closed-door meeting with Mayor Hayes and key officials, he outlined a clear plan of action. First, he insisted on identifying and interviewing everyone involved in the incident. Second, he proposed launching an independent investigation into the broader culture of misconduct within the department. Finally, he emphasized the need for transparency, promising regular updates to the public and inviting community input throughout the process. "I didn't come here to punish people," Marcus said firmly, his gaze steady as he addressed the room. "I came here to fix what's broken, but that starts with holding individuals accountable. If we don't address this head-on, nothing will change." His words resonated deeply, even among those skeptical of his intentions. By refusing to let anger dictate his response, Marcus demonstrated the kind of leadership Ridgewood desperately needed. Still, challenges loomed large, and Marcus knew better than to underestimate the resistance he would face. Meanwhile, Tyrell, the UI teenager who filmed the incident, became an unexpected hero. His video, viewed millions of times online, sparked conversations about police brutality and racial bias far beyond Ridgewood's borders. Journalists flocked to interview him, eager to hear his perspective on what had transpired. At first, Tyrell was hesitant to speak publicly, fearing retaliation from local authorities. But Marcus personally reached out, assuring him that his courage had made a difference. "You stood up when most people would have looked away," Marcus told him during a private meeting. "That takes guts. Don't ever doubt the power of doing the right thing." Encouraged by Marcus's support, Tyrell agreed to share his story. In interviews, he described how he'd witnessed the officers approach Marcus, tie him to the pole, and laugh as they drove off. He spoke candidly about his initial fear and the decision to record the event, emphasizing the importance of documenting injustice. "If I hadn't filmed it," Tyrell said, his voice steady despite his youth, "nobody would have believed this really happened." Tyrell's bravery inspired others in the community to come forward with their own experiences. A woman recounted being stopped without cause while driving home from work. A father described how officers had harassed his teenage son for simply sitting on a park bench. Each story added fuel to the growing demand for reform, making it impossible for the department to ignore the depth of the problem. Back at the precinct, Marcus began calling the officers involved into his office one by one. Ryan, Blake, and Cole had no choice but to comply. Ignoring a direct order from the new chief would only make matters worse. When Ryan entered first, his face was pale, his usual cockiness replaced by nervousness. Marcus gestured for him to sit, then placed a printed copy of Tyrell's video on the desk between them. "Let's start with the basics," Marcus said calmly, leaning back in his chair. "Tell me your side of the story." Ryan hesitated, fidgeting with his hands. We thought he was suspicious," he stammered. "He didn't look like he belonged here." "Suspicious?" Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Because of how I was dressed? Because of my skin color?" Ryan squirmed uncomfortably. "It wasn't like that," he muttered, though his tone lacked conviction. Blake followed next, offering a similar explanation. Both men admitted to tying Marcus to the pole but claimed it was just a prank meant to teach him a lesson. They downplayed their actions, insisting they never intended to hurt anyone. Cole, however, proved far more defiant. When it was his turn to face Marcus, he refused to apologize or acknowledge any wrongdoing. "He shouldn't have been loitering," Cole snapped, crossing his arms. "And if he didn't like what happened, maybe he shouldn't have come to our town in the first place." Marcus leaned forward, his expression hardening. "This isn't your town," he replied sharply. "It belongs to everyone, including me. Your arrogance doesn't give you the right to treat people like animals." Cole's defiance infuriated Marcus, but it also confirmed something he already suspected. Some officers weren't just reckless. They genuinely believed they were above the law. This mindset, Marcus realized, was the root of the problem. Punishing a few bad apples wouldn't be enough. Real change required addressing the toxic culture that allowed such attitudes to flourish in the first place. As word of Marcus's interrogation spread through the department, reactions varied widely. Some officers privately admitted they were relieved to see accountability finally being enforced. Others, emboldened by years of unchecked behavior, pushed back against what they saw as unnecessary interference. Anonymous messages began circulating, criticizing Marcus's leadership and questioning his motives. One particularly scathing note appeared on his desk overnight. "You'll never fit in here. Go back where you came from." Despite the hostility, Marcus remained undeterred. He understood that resistance was inevitable, especially in a town resistant to change. But he also knew that every challenge presented an opportunity to prove doubters wrong, to inspire allies, and to set an example for future generations of law enforcement. To further demonstrate his commitment to transparency, Marcus organized a town hall meeting at Ridgewood's community center. Hundreds of residents packed the auditorium, eager to hear directly from their new police chief. Sitting at a small table on stage, Marcus listened intently as people voiced their frustrations, fears, and hopes for the future. One elderly woman tearfully recounted how her grandson had been wrongfully arrested. A young mother expressed concern for her children's safety, and Tyrell, seated near the front, stood up to thank Marcus for standing firm in the face of adversity. When it was his turn to speak, Marcus addressed the crowd with sincerity. "I know trust isn't given, it's earned," he said, his voice resonating through the room. "And I promise you, I'm here to earn yours. Together, we can create a police department that protects and serves everyone equally. But it won't happen overnight. It'll take effort, patience, and cooperation from all of us." The applause that followed was thunderous, a sign that Marcus's message was beginning to resonate. For the first time in years, Ridgewood's residents dared to hope that change was possible. But Marcus knew the hardest work still lay ahead. Rebuilding trust would require more than speeches. It would demand consistent action, unwavering integrity, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. And Marcus was ready to rise to the challenge. The days following Marcus Johnson's town hall meeting marked a turning point in Ridgewood. The entire community seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how the new police chief would follow through on his promises. Marcus knew that words alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to take decisive action, and he needed to do it quickly. With the eyes of the nation still fixed on Ridgewood, there was no room for hesitation or half measures. Marcus began by issuing disciplinary actions against the 3 officers involved in the incident. Ryan and Blake, who had shown at least some willingness to admit their wrongdoing during their interviews, were demoted from their positions and suspended without pay for 6 months. They were also ordered to undergo mandatory sensitivity training and perform 200 hours of community service working alongside local organizations. While harsh, these measures were designed not just to punish but to rehabilitate, to give them a chance to reflect on their actions and learn from their mistakes. Cole, however, received no such leniency. His refusal to acknowledge any fault, coupled with his defiant attitude during questioning, left Marcus with little choice. Cole was fired outright, stripped of his badge and gun, and banned from ever seeking employment with the Ridgewood Police Department again. When the news broke, reactions were mixed. Some residents applauded the decision, calling it long overdue. Others, particularly within the department, grumbled about what they saw as overly harsh treatment. But Marcus stood firm, explaining that accountability meant holding everyone to the same standard, regardless of rank or connections. "Justice isn't about revenge," Marcus told reporters during a press briefing. "It's about making sure people understand the consequences of their actions. If we let things slide because it's easier or less controversial, then nothing changes." While dealing with the immediate fallout of the incident, Marcus turned his attention to addressing the deeper issues plaguing the department. He launched a comprehensive review of policies and procedures, enlisting the help of independent consultants specializing in law enforcement reform. These experts spent weeks interviewing officers, analyzing data, and observing daily operations. Their findings painted a troubling picture: widespread racial profiling, excessive use of force, and a lack of oversight that allowed misconduct to go unchecked. Armed with this information, Marcus implemented sweeping changes. First, he introduced body cameras for all officers, mandating that they remain active during every interaction with the public. To ensure compliance, random audits were conducted regularly, and failure to adhere to the policy resulted in automatic suspension. Next, he established a civilian review board tasked with investigating complaints against officers. Comprised of diverse members from the community, the board operated independently of the department, providing an additional layer of accountability. Perhaps most importantly, Marcus prioritized training. Every officer, veteran and rookie alike, was required to attend workshops on implicit bias, de-escalation techniques, and cultural competency. These sessions weren't optional. Attendance was tied directly to job performance evaluations. At first, many officers resisted, viewing the training as unnecessary or even insulting. But over time, attitudes began to shift. Slowly but surely, some started to recognize the value in understanding perspectives different from their own. Despite these efforts, resistance lingered. Anonymous threats continued to appear, targeting both Marcus and his family. Late one night, someone spray-painted derogatory messages on the side of his car parked outside his temporary apartment. Another time, a suspicious package arrived at the precinct addressed to him, prompting a bomb squad investigation. It turned out to be harmless. Each incident served as a reminder of the risks Marcus faced in taking on such a monumental challenge. Yet rather than backing down, Marcus doubled down on his commitment to transparency and safety. He hired private security to monitor his home and ensured his wife and teenage daughter were briefed on emergency protocols. Publicly, he remained unfazed, using the threats as fuel to push forward. "If they're scared enough to threaten me, then I must be doing something right," he quipped during a staff meeting. His humor lightened the mood but also underscored his determination. As reforms took shape, Marcus worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with the community. He hosted weekly coffee with the chief events at local diners, inviting residents to share their concerns face-to-face. No topic was off-limits, and Marcus listened intently, jotting notes in his leather-bound journal. One elderly man expressed frustration about speeding cars near schools, while a young woman voiced fears about walking home alone at night. Each conversation gave Marcus insight into the everyday challenges facing Ridgewood and reminded him why his work mattered. He also partnered with local leaders to launch initiatives aimed at fostering positive relationships between the police and the community. Youth mentorship programs brought officers into schools to talk about careers in law enforcement and provide guidance to students. Neighborhood patrols became less about enforcement and more about engagement, with officers stopping to chat with shopkeepers, parents, and kids playing basketball in the park. Even small gestures like handing out free ice cream cones during summer festivals went a long way toward humanizing the badge. Not everyone welcomed these changes, however. A faction within the department, led by a veteran sergeant named Harris, openly opposed Marcus's reforms. Harris argued that the new policies were impractical and undermined officers' ability to do their jobs effectively. "We can't protect this town if we're too busy worrying about cameras and paperwork," he complained during a heated staff meeting. Marcus didn't shy away from confrontation. Calmly but firmly, he challenged Harris's stance. "Our job is to serve and protect, not just ourselves but everyone in this town. If you think wearing a camera or attending a training session makes you less effective, then maybe you need to reconsider why you became a cop in the first place." Harris stormed out of the room muttering under his breath, but Marcus's message resonated with others. Slowly, dissenting voices grew quieter, replaced by cautious optimism. Even some of Harris's allies began to admit that Marcus's approach might actually work, if only they gave it a chance. By the end of the month, signs of progress emerged. Crime rates in Ridgewood began to drop, thanks in part to improved communication between residents and law enforcement. Calls to the precinct's non-emergency line increased as people felt more comfortable reporting suspicious activity. Officers reported feeling less tension during traffic stops and neighborhood patrols, attributing the shift to better training and clearer guidelines. For Marcus, these victories were bittersweet. He knew the road ahead would remain difficult, filled with setbacks and resistance. But each step forward reinforced his belief that change was possible, even in a place as divided as Ridgewood. As he drove home one evening, passing the gas station where it all began, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The pole where he'd been tied still stood there, a stark reminder of the humiliation he'd endured. Yet, in its shadow, he saw hope, a glimmer of light illuminating a path toward justice and healing. The journey was far from over, but Marcus was ready. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, guided by the principles of fairness, integrity, and compassion. Because in the end, that's what being a leader truly meant. Months had passed since Marcus Johnson first arrived in Ridgewood, and the town was beginning to feel different. The changes Marcus implemented weren't just policies on paper. They were becoming part of the fabric of daily life. Crime rates continued to decline, and relationships between residents and officers slowly improved. For the first time in years, people felt a sense of hope. But Marcus knew better than anyone that progress wasn't linear. Every victory came with its own challenges, and every step forward seemed to invite new obstacles. One crisp autumn morning, Marcus stood outside the precinct, watching as officers prepared for their shifts. Gone were the days when they could breeze through without accountability. Now each officer wore a body camera clipped securely to their uniform, and patrol cars were equipped with dashboard cameras. Complaints about the added scrutiny persisted, But Marcus noticed something remarkable. Many officers began carrying themselves differently. They spoke more respectfully, listened more intently, and approached situations with caution rather than aggression. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Inside the building, Marcus reviewed reports from the Civilian Review Board. Established just months earlier, the board had already investigated numerous complaints against officers, issuing recommendations ranging from additional training to formal reprimands. One case stood out: a veteran officer accused of using excessive force during an arrest. After reviewing footage from the officer's body camera, the board concluded that while the use of force wasn't justified, the situation escalated due to poor communication. Instead of recommending termination, they suggested targeted de-escalation training and mandatory counseling sessions. Marcus approved the decision, seeing it as another opportunity to educate rather than punish. Word of these developments spread beyond Ridgewood. National media outlets praised Marcus's leadership, highlighting his balanced approach to reform. Civil rights organizations invited him to speak at conferences, eager to learn how he managed to navigate such a contentious environment. Yet, despite the accolades, Marcus remained grounded. He often reminded himself, and others, that success wasn't measured by headlines or awards. True change happened quietly, one interaction at a time. Terrell, the teenager who filmed the infamous video, became a regular presence around the precinct. Encouraged by Marcus's support, he joined a youth mentorship program designed to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. At first, Tyrell was hesitant, unsure if officers would genuinely listen to someone like him. But as weeks turned into months, he found himself opening up, sharing his dreams of becoming a filmmaker and documenting real stories that mattered. Officers, too, warmed up to him, asking questions about his interests and offering advice whenever they could. One evening, after attending a screening of short films created by participants in the program, Marcus pulled Tyrell aside. "You've got talent," he said, smiling warmly. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tyrell grinned, visibly proud of his work. "Thanks, Chief. I couldn't have done it without your help." Marcus shook his head. "It's not my help you should thank, it's yourself. You're brave enough to tell the truth even when it's hard. That's something special." Their bond grew stronger over time, serving as a powerful example of what could happen when people chose understanding over judgment. Other teenagers in the program followed Tyrell's lead, finding common ground with officers they once feared. Together, they organized community events, basketball tournaments, art exhibits, and volunteer cleanup drives, all aimed at fostering connection and mutual respect. Despite the positive momentum, resistance within the department refused to disappear entirely. Sergeant Harris, still bitter about the reforms, continued to sow discord among his colleagues. During roll calls, he muttered under his breath about political correctness and wasting resources. His comments earned nods of agreement from a few officers, but mostly fell flat. Most of the department recognized that Harris's views were outdated and counterproductive. Still, his persistence created tension, forcing Marcus to address the issue head-on. In a private meeting, Marcus confronted Harris directly. "I know you don't agree with everything we're doing," he began, leaning forward slightly. "But undermining morale doesn't help anyone. Not me, not the officers, and certainly not the people of Ridgewood." Harris crossed his arms, defensively. "All I'm saying is that some of these rules tie our hands. How are we supposed to do our jobs if we're constantly second-guessing ourselves?" "It's not about second-guessing," Marcus replied calmly. "It's about thinking twice before acting. We're here to protect, not provoke. If that means taking a moment to consider the impact of our actions, then so be it." Though Harris didn't admit defeat, the conversation marked a turning point. Over time, his criticism softened, replaced by grudging acceptance. Marcus knew Harris might never fully embrace the reforms, but as long as he followed the rules, that was enough. For now. Outside the precinct, Marcus worked tirelessly to maintain open lines of communication with the community. He attended church services, school assemblies, and local business meetings, always ready to listen and engage. Residents appreciated his efforts, though skepticism lingered among some. An elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson voiced her concerns during one of Marcus's coffee with the chief events. "I believe you mean well," she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. "But how do we know this isn't just temporary? What happens when the cameras stop rolling and the reporters leave?" Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's a fair question," he admitted, "and the answer is simple. Nothing lasts unless we make it last. Change isn't something that happens overnight. It's something we build together. My job is to lay the foundation, but it's up to all of us to keep moving forward." Mrs. Thompson smiled faintly, her expression softening. "Well, I suppose it's a start." As winter approached, Marcus prepared for the anniversary of the incident that had brought him to Ridgewood, the gas station where he'd been tied to. The pole had become a symbol of both injustice and resilience. Residents decorated the pole with ribbons and notes of encouragement, transforming it into a makeshift memorial. Some called it the Pole of Hope, a reminder of how far the town had come and how much farther it needed to go. On the morning of the anniversary, Marcus returned to the site, standing silently beneath the fluttering ribbons. Memories of that night flooded back, the humiliation, the anger, the resolve, but so did a profound sense of gratitude. Without that experience, he might never have realized the depth of Ridgewood's struggles or the strength of its people. Later that day, he addressed a crowd gathered at the community center. Standing beside Tyrell and Mayor Hayes, Marcus reflected on the past year. "This pole could have been my breaking point," he said, gesturing to a photo projected onto a screen behind him. "Instead, it became a turning point, for me, for this department, and for this town." Applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and energy. As Marcus stepped away from the podium, he exchanged a glance with Tyrell, who gave him a thumbs up. For Marcus, the journey was far from over, but the progress they'd made proved one thing above all else. No matter how dark things seemed, there was always room for light. Looking ahead, Marcus understood that maintaining momentum would require vigilance. Reforms needed constant nurturing, and trust demanded ongoing effort. Threats still trickled in occasionally, but Marcus refused to let fear dictate his choices. With his wife and daughter by his side, along with a growing network of allies, he faced the future with quiet confidence. The sun rose over Ridgewood on a crisp spring morning, casting golden light across the quiet streets. It had been exactly 1 year since Marcus Johnson arrived in town, tied to a pole by 3 reckless officers who never imagined their actions would spark a revolution. As Marcus stood once again at the gas station where it all began, he couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Not just in the town, but within himself. He ran his fingers lightly over the ribbons tied around the infamous light pole, each strand representing a story of resilience, hope, and unity. Some were brightly colored, others faded from months of weathering, but every single one carried meaning. Notes attached to them bore messages like, "Thank you for standing strong," and "Justice starts here." Children played nearby, laughing as they chased each other around the parking lot while parents chatted casually, no longer glancing nervously at passing patrol cars. The transformation was palpable, invisible, yet undeniable. Marcus turned to face the small crowd that had gathered behind him. Residents, officers, and community leaders alike stood shoulder to shoulder, united in purpose. Among them was Tyrell, now taller and more confident, holding his camera close to his chest. Over the past year, the teenager had blossomed into a passionate advocate for justice, using his lens to capture moments of connection between police and citizens. His short film about Ridgewood's journey had won awards at local festivals, earning praise for its raw honesty and optimism. Today, he was documenting this milestone, a celebration of progress and perseverance. Mayor Linda Hayes stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "A year ago, we faced a moment of shame," she admitted, pausing to collect herself. "But out of that darkness came an opportunity to heal, to grow, and to become better than we ever thought possible. Chief Johnson didn't just bring reforms, he brought heart. He reminded us what it means to truly serve." Applause rippled through the gathering. and Marcus raised a hand to quiet them. When he spoke, his tone was steady but filled with gratitude. "This isn't my victory," he said, scanning the faces before him. "It's ours. Every person here has played a part in creating change, whether by speaking out, lending a hand, or simply believing that things could be different. Together, we've shown that even the hardest challenges can be overcome if we refuse to give up." Later, that afternoon, Marcus hosted a community fair at Ridgewood Park, bringing together residents and officers in a spirit of camaraderie. Booths lined the grassy field, offering everything from free hot dogs to fingerprinting kits for kids. A group of teenagers performed slam poetry, their words echoing themes of empowerment and reconciliation. Officers joined in games of tug-of-war and sack races, their laughter mingling with cheers from the crowd. For many, it was hard to believe these same individuals had once been viewed with suspicion and fear. One booth caught Marcus's attention, a display showcasing artwork created during the youth mentorship program. Paintings, sculptures, and photographs adorned makeshift walls, each piece telling a unique story. One particularly striking painting depicted a tree with roots shaped like clasped hands, symbolizing the bond between law enforcement and the community. The artist, a shy 12-year-old named Mia, blushed when Marcus complimented her work. "I wanted to show that even though we're different, we're connected," she explained softly. Marcus nodded, visibly moved. "You did an amazing job," he told her. "Keep sharing your voice, it matters." As the day wore on, Marcus found himself reflecting on the countless interactions that had shaped this journey. He remembered the skepticism in Mrs. Thompson's eyes during their first meeting, and the pride in her smile when she later volunteered to lead a neighborhood watch initiative. He recalled the frustration of dealing with resistant officers like Harris, and the relief when they finally began embracing the reforms. Most of all, he thought about Terrell, the boy who dared to film a horrifying act and ended up inspiring a movement. That evening, Marcus returned to the precinct, where he met with his senior staff for a debriefing session. The mood was celebratory, but tinged with seriousness. Crime rates had dropped significantly over the past year, thanks in large part to improved communication and trust-building efforts. Yet, challenges remained. Anonymous threats still trickled in occasionally, reminding everyone that not everyone supported the changes. Budget constraints threatened to limit funding for key programs, requiring creative solutions to keep initiatives alive. "We've come a long way," Marcus acknowledged, leaning back in his chair. "But let's not kid ourselves. There's still work to do. Change isn't a destination, it's a process. Our job is to stay vigilant, listen closely, and keep pushing forward." His team nodded in agreement, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They knew Marcus was right. Progress wasn't guaranteed, it had to be fought for day after day. But under his leadership, they felt equipped to handle whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, Marcus continued to prioritize transparency and accountability. He introduced quarterly town hall meetings, inviting residents to share feedback and suggest improvements. These sessions became a cornerstone of community engagement, fostering open dialogue and mutual understanding. Officers participated alongside civilians, answering questions and addressing concerns directly. While disagreements arose occasionally, the overall atmosphere remained respectful and constructive. Meanwhile, national recognition poured in. Law enforcement agencies across the country looked to Ridgewood as a model for reform, eager to learn from Marcus's approach. Civil rights organizations honored him with awards, praising his commitment to justice and equality. Despite the accolades, Marcus remained humble, deflecting praise onto his team and the community. "I'm just one piece of the puzzle," he often said. "Real change happens when everyone works together." At home, Marcus cherished quieter moments with his wife and daughter. Though the demands of his role sometimes kept him away, they understood the importance of his mission. His wife Sarah frequently joined him at community events, lending her support and organizing fundraisers for local charities. Their teenage daughter, Maya, volunteered at the youth mentorship program, bonding with participants over shared interests in art and music. Together they formed a tight-knit family unit, grounded in love and purpose. On weekends, Marcus took long walks through Ridgewood, savoring the simple pleasures of small-town life. He stopped to chat with shopkeepers, waved to children playing in parks, and exchanged greetings with neighbors tending their gardens. Each interaction reinforced his belief in the power of human connection. No matter how daunting the task ahead, he reminded himself that change started with relationships, with listening, learning, and growing alongside others. One evening, as Marcus sat on the porch of their rented home, Sarah handed him a cup of tea and joined him on the swing. "You've done good work," she said, resting her head against his shoulder. Marcus smiled faintly, staring out at the horizon. "We've done good work," he corrected gently, "and there's still so much more to do." Sarah nodded, squeezing his hand. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the stars emerged one by one, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace. Ridgewood wasn't perfect. It might never be. But it was moving in the right direction, step by step. And as long as people refused to give up on each other, hope would always find a way to shine through. For Marcus Johnson, the journey was far from over. But every challenge, every triumph, and every lesson learned had prepared him for whatever lay ahead. Redemption wasn't just a destination, it was a legacy built on courage, compassion, and unwavering faith in the possibility of a brighter tomorrow.